and we're going to find out why. His Aunt Franny Kellogg married into the wealthy Kellogg family, which, Kellogg's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a Hubbards that, growing up, they lived up the road from me.
Yeah.
Last name Hubbard. Which is kind of cool.
She was very, very rich. She had no heirs. So when she passed, she left all her money to the city of Montpelier, which was $350,000, which would be $9 million today. I always love to see what it would be today if it was, like back in time. This was like the late 1800s. I have a lot of stories coming from that time. It's like I love the Victorian era. I love all that stuff. She wanted the money to be used to build a chapel and a gatehouse to the cemetery and a public library. That was what her wishes were. According to Steve Perkins, he was the executive director of the Vermont Historical Society, and it was an article I read that they had quoted him in it. However, John Hubbard pulled a fast one with the inheritance and somehow was able to swindle the money because he was next to kin, technically, even though she didn't leave the money to him. He
was her husband, so.
No. It was her nephew.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So he got the money. This really pissed off the city of Montpelier because they really wanted to use that money to be put into the city.
Right.
Which led them to go to court, and they had trying to have a battle in court over who would get the money. Like, he has it, but really we should have it because she left it to us, blah, blah, blah. Ended up, they compromised, and Hubbard agreed to pay the city $30,000, but he insisted that the library wasn't just called the Kellogg Library, it had to be called the Kellogg-Hubbard Library.
Even though it wasn't his money to begin with. What a turd.
And so he's an ass.
Yeah.
But sometimes karma gets you in the ass.
Oh.
So, a couple of years later, in 1899, he died the richest man in the city, probably the most disliked man in the city, of liver cancer, which isn't good. It's awful, but God, you lived a terrible life, and
the liver is your seat of your anger. So if he was an angry man, that's why it was there.
Well, he wasn't good. So,
sounds angry.
Yeah.
Angry little man.
And he probably was a little man. Hubbard wanted a monument on his grave.
Of course.
And he was buried in the Green Mountain Cemetery. And he wanted the Greek mythological figure of Thanatos, not to be confused with Thanos in Marvel. Thanatos, who is known as Death personified. It was commissioned by Carrie Bitters, or is it Carl? No, Carl. Sorry, Carl with a K. Bitters. He created the sculpture to be the thought on death. The sculpture of Thanatos is wearing a black shroud, and I'm going to post pictures of what the Black Agnus looks like. And that's what the name started becoming, is the Black Agnus.
Where did you get Agnes from Thanatos?
Well, we'll find out just a minute. Okay. That's the next question we have. So the story is, there's a story that's decades old in Montpelier, saying 3 teenagers who sat on the Black Agnus during a full moon to prove how brave they were. Nothing happened that night, but within a week later, one fell and shattered his leg. Another died in a car accident, and the third one drowned. So the 3 teenagers that went there and sat on the lap of the Agnes on a full moon all died within 7 days.
Yikes.
So a lot, people who know about the legend of the Black Agnus don't interact with her much. People go there to take pictures of it, but no one's hopping on her lap. And it's not even a her.
I want to go sit on her lap.
Well, you can sit alone because I'm not doing it. But how did the statue, who was created to be Thanatos, which is not a woman,
okay,
no one's named Agnes or Agnes buried there. So why is this a thing? This all starts with way back. Well, it's not that far back. Actually, it's in the 1800s also. Marion Adams, who was the wife of Henry Adams. Henry Adams is a grandson of President John Quincy Adams. Her nickname was Clover. She was a celebrated socialite in Washington, and a hostess, and people really liked her. She was she's kind of cool. She's one of our country's first female photographers. Cool. In 1885, her father passed away, and she went into a deep depression, and she couldn't handle it. And in 1886, she ended her own life by drinking chemicals from her photography supplies, which is
God.
awful.
And I took photography,
The
like
smells.
that kind, and they do not smell good.
No, because I took the photography class and I was like, "Ooh, I can't even imagine."
Can you imagine drinking that shit?
No, and it was like potassium or something that she drank.
Oh, it's probably like some kind of cyanide.
Yeah, a form of cyanide. Yeah.
Ew.
So her husband Henry was heartbroken when she died, and he wanted to memorialize her. He turned to the American's greatest sculptor of the time, Augustus St. Gaudens. Gaudens? Gaudens. Gaudens?
Dens. Gaudens? I would say Gaudens.
Because Henry, after his wife's death, traveled to Japan just to clear his head. He became fascinated with Eastern religions, and he wanted the sculptor to design something similar to a Buddhist concept of nirvana, releasing from the cycle of life and death, release of despair and pain, and an extinction of passion, leading to inner gratitude. Mm-hmm. So, it took 4 years for Augustus to finish the sculpture. And when it was done, people were like enamored by it, but they didn't consider it scary. It was beautiful and really sad. It was a very sad depiction. It was shrouded, sitting on a bench, very similar to the Thanatos one.
Right.
And Henry Adams never spoke of his wife's death publicly. He didn't want to talk about it. It was too much for him. He didn't like the attention the monument received, and he never would name it because he wanted it to be a memorial for his wife, but he didn't want it to be a spectacle, right. Which it kind of started to become because it was no one had seen anything like this before.
Where was he from?
This is Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay.
It was in the Rock Creek Park Cemetery in Washington, D.C. is where she was buried. In 1906, Mark Twain actually visited the site because this was a beautiful work of art. People wanted to see it because of that. And he named it Grief, and that nickname stuck. And to him, like, this is the epitome of grief, like this sculpture. And when you see the sculpture, it's very sad. It's beautiful. Even the one in Montpelier is beautiful. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. It was mysterious, so that and because it was beautiful, it was attracted a lot of people to come look at it. They wanted to there were people requesting to have copies made of it, and Henry Adams was like, "No, I don't want this. This is for my wife. I don't want all this." So he planted a bunch of shrubbery in front of it so people couldn't see it. And it made it so it was really hard to find, and it became like more mysterious. The things he did just try to prevent the attention actually made it gain more attention.
Right, the hype.
Yeah. But there was a sculptor, named Edward L.A. Pausch, Pausch. Pausch?
Yeah.
You know I can't say things, so I have to double check. He was able to sneak there, and he actually made a mold of the statue against anyone's wishes. Like, no one said he could do this.
He's a dirtbag.
Yeah. Adams wrote in a letter to a friend saying that there were marks on the head where traces of casting was made. So they knew someone made a cast or a mold from the statue, and he was really pissed about it because they tried to wipe it off. They couldn't. It made marks on the head, and it just kind of ruined the thing. But, so he made his own version of it from the cast he did.
My oldest child is an artist, and I think that he would be disgusted by that.
He's right over there. So,
what do you think?
Yeah,
it's awful.
It is awful.
Stealing someone else's art, especially when they specifically said not to.
Yeah.
Stealing someone else's art, copying it for their own gain. Still not okay.
No, it's stealing. It's stealing. Period.
It's definitely theft. It's intellectual theft.
And you ruin the original piece as well.
Right.
That's because it's a physical piece.
Mm-hmm.
Ruined it.
And making the mold made marks on the statue that can never be removed.
And it was an emotionally driven piece due to grief.
Yeah, it's pretty crappy, isn't it? So this copy, the copy became more famous than the original.
Which I'm sure the guy was okay with that because it took...
Well, the guy who had commissioned the statue didn't care because he was like, whatever, I don't want people coming to this one, so whatever. The guy who did it didn't really know, but I'll tell you a little bit in a second. So in 1925, the copy was sold to Felix Agnus from Baltimore, Maryland. And he says that he had no clue that this was a copy. Like, he thought it was great and he bought it. So in 1925, he bought that. He was born in France in 1839, and he became a seaman, which makes me laugh. I'm like a 13-year-old. I can't help it. He decided to become a seaman.
A sailor.
Instead of going to college.
Okay.
And then he wanted to become a soldier, and he immigrated to the United States. And he actually worked briefly as a worker in for a jewelry maker in Tiffany & Company, which is kind of cool. Yeah. Then he volunteered for service in the Union and entered the Federal Army as a sergeant, and he left 4 years later. They say that he had so much shrapnel in him that he clinked when he walked, like he jingled when he walked. He was wounded twice, and at one point convalesced in the house of the Baltimore newspaper publisher, Charles Fulton.
This is the Agnus guy.
This is Felix Agnus.
Okay.
So we've moved on to Felix.
Mm-hmm.
While he was convalescing in the house of the Baltimore newspaper publisher, because I guess they were taking in soldiers to help them, his daughter was his nurse.
This is World War One? What year?
Yes, World War One-ish.
Yeah.
So, Charles' daughter, Annie, was his nurse, and Felix fell in love with her and married her.
That happened a lot.
Yes. You know, that war and
the romance,
romantic.
Nursing me back to health.
Yes. So when Charles passed away, Annie's dad, Felix became the publisher of the Baltimore American and then launched the Evening Baltimore Star. So he took over that. So he had a lot of money too. So Agnes purchased Felix Agnus, you see where Black Agnus is?
I know.
Purchased a family plot in Druid Ridge Cemetery in Pikesville, Maryland. He purchased a copy, and he said that the sculpture had been, I can't even... Okay, sorry. I couldn't read my own handwriting. So, anyway, he thought, when he went to install the sculpture, the Pausch said, the guy who copied it, that it was
original?
No, he didn't say it was original. He told him it was a copy, but it was okay. Like, he got permission to make this copy of the same thing. So when he purchased it, he knew it was the same as the one that was on Clover Adams' grave.
Right.
But he was told that it was an official copy. Like, it's okay. But he didn't lie to him about that it was a copy. He didn't say it was his work. He didn't get permission to do it.
Right.
So he got the sculpture, and after he bought the plot, he wanted something big and amazing on it. So he thought, this is beautiful. I love this. I want this on our plot. When his mother passed away, he brought her body over from France, and he buried her there. The sculpture soon after got the nickname of the Black Aggie, or Black Agnus, because of his name, and the black shroud. It was slightly different than the Adams one, but it was based off the Adams sculpture. She became a subject of folklore. At first, people were trying to say that a witch was buried underneath it. Because of the way it looked, it was kind of dark and kind of spooky. Yeah. People were making up stories or whatever. A year later, Augustus St. Gaudens, the widow of the original sculptor, found out about this copy and sent a letter explaining that, this was not, he had not permission to do this. And Agnes said, yeah, I'm innocent victim of this. I didn't know. I was told that this was okay, that they got permission to do this. And she's like, no, they didn't. And she insisted that he sue the art dealer who sold it to him, which he did. And he won it for $4,500. He won the suit. but he refused to give up the statue. She wanted him to give her the statue